Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to series 2 of the Lockdown Lunch and Learns. This is part 1. My name's Laura Thompson, and it's a pleasure to be hosting this Lunch and Learn. And what's wonderful is that we're getting lots of feedback about how people are finding the ability to listen again really useful as well, and passing that on. So wonderful to see you again. So let's kick off, and I'll share my screen. So welcome to the 30-minute lockdown lunch and learn. Title of this episode is Clear Thinking and Decision Making. The aim of these sessions is designed to keep our professional skills sharp, maintained, ready for action on the other side, because the last thing our key workers need is me requiring lots and lots of support to get back into work mode when we're on the other side. So the best thing I can do is not only keep my body indoors, but to keep my mind intact as well. So what better topic to be looking at than a favourite of mine over the last couple of years, looking at thinking and decision making. And where in series 1, I was using inspiration from nature to provide some metaphors and parallels for what that could mean to being able to maximise our potential in this period of transformation. In series 2, I'm going to be looking at inspiring stories of human endeavour throughout history. So the link I'm going to be making in this session is about the Stoics, so wisdom from over 2,000 years ago, and how could that help us navigate through these interesting times. So thinking about our thoughts and decisions has interested us humans for some time. Check out this advice. Before making a decision, the first thing to do, don't get worked up, for everything happens according to the nature of all things. Then, carefully consider the task at hand for what it is, while remembering that your purpose is to be a good human being. Get straight to doing what nature requires of you, and speak as you see most just and fitting, with kindness, modesty, and sincerity. Pretty relevant, yes? Well, astonishing to think that that was written nearly 2,000 years ago by Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations. So there we go. And I have found that quite comforting when feeling a bit amateurish in some of the decisions that I've been needed to take recently. And so this goes out to potentially all of us who are finding ourselves faced with the opportunity or the necessity to think about some decisions that there was no training course for. So how can we use some of those effective thinking and decision-making processes, even if the topic was potentially beyond prediction? I've been interested in this concept for about 5 years now, because I've been particularly interested in what impact technology is having on the human edge of judgment, decision, instinct, etc. And I think it was really honed to me the power of good organisational decision making, with hearing stories over the years, for example, a London borough being able to reduce the amount of time for a child to be adopted from 900 plus days to 400 plus days. So by the ability of all those parts of the organisation, the corporate body being able to decide pacier and in a more collaborative way, taking that time frame down from nearly 4 years to under 2 years for the time for a child to get adopted. Wow. So when we really set our mind to it, we can make some huge impacts, not only in our domestic worlds, but in our professional worlds as well. So this is an opportunity to have a look at some practical tips. And as always, create a great space to learn. This is judgment-free, one size fits one. Keep the stuff you like, discard the stuff you don't like. Feel free to use the content for your own sessions and your own workshops. Friendly, light and positive, I hope you find them, and always rooted in commercial practicality. So how could we use this afternoon? Focused on what we can do. So 3 objectives: providing practical suggestions to guide your thinking, and tips to help you thrive whilst working from home, no matter how makeshift your home office space. And the practical objectives for today's session is tools for confident decision making when under pressure, strategies to enable a sensible, logical and rational thought process, and frameworks for explaining and engaging people in decisions in potentially what might be quite a new and unpracticed environment. Okay, gentle reminder from nature about the mindset for thriving through rapid change. This is time to channel the mindset of a fox as opposed to a panda. A fox by nature is resilient, dynamic, it leads a very broad life, which means it is equipped at the turn of an evening to be able to adjust its skills, for example, from hunting to foraging, whereas a panda finds change a little bit more stressful because of the way in which they're built. Their life is much slower, and change means they have to lumber into it. So the challenge is that a panda finds rapid change much more stressful to them as a species than potentially a fox. So how can we channel our inner foxes with reference to this particular skill of thinking and decision making? So how do I make decisions with confidence when under pressure? So we're going to do a little experiment, because all of this is mutual learning. And I'd like to have a think about how has the ability to make decisions been impacted by the current lockdown conditions. I'm now going to stop the share and I'm going to launch a poll. And the question is, relaunch poll 1. The question is, has your ability to make confident decisions been impacted by the current lockdown conditions? So just that general skill of being able to take confident decisions, how has that been impacted? Yes for good, yes for worse, not at all. It's an anonymous poll, so don't know who answers what. And again, this is for you as a participant in this session to see whether this adds value to you, completing a poll and keeping it interactive. Okay, so let's have a look. And of course, it'd be interesting to see all the people that listen again, how they found it. So I will read out the results. Okay, so just going to give it a couple more seconds. Okay, so let's end the poll. And we have a few more people getting in. Okay, so out of our 12 people that responded, 6 are saying, yes, my ability to make decisions has been impacted for good. 5, yes for worse, and 1, no. So we have 50% of people actually saying, I've found my ability to take confident decisions better. And 42%, yes, it has been impacted for worse. There we go. So we've got a split poll. Okay, so whether you are enjoying this sense of decisiveness or feeling really amateur in this decisiveness, what we're going to look at now are some an efficient series of tips that over the years I've been able to glean from listening, talking and interviewing various people in terms of decision making under pressure. Okay, so let's get some lessons from over 2,000 years ago. This is Epicurus. You don't develop courage by being happy in your relationships every day. You develop courage by surviving difficult times and challenging adversity. So, main mindset around this thing is, whilst we are experiencing these unusual pressures, our skills are probably never being quite so refined. So if you're feeling like you're a bit out of your comfort zone at the moment, then the skills are being stretched. Let's have a look at how we can borrow some lessons from some other industries that might help transfer across to our worlds. Okay, so I have been interested in a while about decision making under pressure, particularly in emergency situations. And I was lucky enough to spend some time with the safety team at the air traffic control teams, and looking at how do air traffic controllers, how are they trained to be able to take the best decision. The outcome might be out of their control, but the best decision that stands up over time if ever they need to justify it. And what I found really interesting was that actually underload, so not enough pressure, is actually more dangerous in terms of making a slip or error than overload. So the way that the air traffic control teams will work is they will always create an artificial sense of pressure. So if I haven't got much going on my particular shift, I will artificially borrow some of my neighbours' workload to ensure that the optimum amount of pressure, which means my brain then knows that it can't switch off. So actually pressure from an air traffic controller's point of view is something that you want when making potentially quite massive decisions. So I think one of the things to think about with this bit is where there's no precedent, remove the fear of making the correct decision, All you can do is make the best decision based on what you see around you rather than the correct outcome, because the outcome is evolving for us all. No appraisal system in the world was set up for this, so shifting the judgment from result to my decision-making process is probably more an appropriate sense of pressure to have. Virtual communication, interestingly enough, requires more accuracy and more clarity in how we express our thoughts. Why is that? Video catch-ups need to be tighter because chat that has no purpose drags in 2D more than it does when you have the companionship of sitting around a physical table. Decisions are needing to have more rigour and more logic that stands to challenge, because logic can go unchecked when solo. Think of all those times where you would have been making decisions and it would have been through some random informal conversations. If you're sitting in the same four walls having to come up with some pretty big decisions, whether they're commercial or domestic, then our thoughts can actually go unchecked when it's just us to refer to. So when there is no precedent, focus the shift and the pressure from result to the actual process itself. And an air traffic controller would view the pressure as actually helping them maintain the optimum decision-making environment. The next thing to have a bit of a think about is, well, what type of decision maker are you? So effective decision-making strategies, from everything I've read, everything I've talked about, listened to over the years, actually blend factual thought and gut feelings. So it is a mix of the observable, logical stuff I see around me and the data that I'm experiencing sensorily inside. So rather than one or the other, which is a bit binary, it's a mix of intuition and logic is probably a good place to start when you're in a new decision-making environment, as we all are. So there might be some simple binary decisions that are facing you at the moment. Shall I, shan't I? And so let's have a look at some of the different ways that we can describe our thinking. So the Oxford English Dictionary defines intuition as the ability to understand something instinctively without the need for step-by-step conscious reasoning. So there'll be stuff that you just feel, that you just know. You don't need to write a list down. There might be some things, though, that you need to write a list down to be able to critically view from different judgment and different positions. We'll look at some tools later that can help with that. Logical, so it's a particular way of thinking, that especially one that is based on reason and based on good judgment. A good check of logic is, are you able to clearly explain it to someone else? And rational, so based on clear thought and reason and a reasonable amount of risk assessment. The cognitive continuum is a fancy way of looking at how much analysis versus gut feel might be appropriate. And actually the research is suggesting that most of us, when we are in effective decision-making mode, are somewhat within the middle. We're equally intuitive and equally analytic. So the third thing to have a think about when thinking about confident decision-making under pressure is how do I ensure that I create the optimal condition in this decision-making environment? And actually, as we learned earlier on from the air traffic controllers, not enough to think about is as dangerous as too much to think about. It might be you're sitting in a room and there's too much noise, or there's silence that is throwing your ability to make decisions maybe differently from how you would have before. So the OODA framework is something that teams have loved over the years, and it's really simple, and it just can help keep spiraling thoughts efficient and checked. Where the OODA loop comes from is it was put together by Colonel John Boyd about 50, 60 years ago, and it was his method for training fighter pilots. And in short, before you hit accelerate, if your airplane has tumbled out of control, you want to make jolly sure that the mountain is behind you, not in front of you. So how can you turn panic into purposeful, quick thinking? And the OODA loop stands for observe. So what am I seeing now? Orient, so is that away or towards the goal that I want? Decide, so what is the best guess I can suggest now? And act, what will I implement now? It's a loop because it then immediately goes back to observe, what am I seeing now? Orient, is that more towards or more away from my goal? Decide, so what is the best guess I can suggest now? And act, what will I implement now? And the OODA framework is a way of containing or using thoughts rather than spiraling, to enable them to go into more of a controlled loop. And so the teams have really enjoyed that as a way to discuss together. So could it be that there's a team conversation coming up and you want to use OODA as a way to talk around that? It could be you're preparing something in your mind that you want to engage with the team later. Is this something that potentially you could use to help put out some thoughts so you're able to, with confidence, think about what best to do next? So how do we take decisions with confidence when under pressure? So when there's no precedent, focus on taking the best decision rather than the right outcome. That might be a more appropriate pressure profile. Effective decision-making strategies tend to be a blend of facts and feelings. So mixing the two, what do I feel? What do I think? And the OODA framework can help keep spiraling thoughts efficient and checked. Okay, so objective number 2. How do I keep a sensible, logical and rational thought process? So the trials we are encountering now are introducing us to our strengths that potentially could be really useful for us on the other side. Epictetus in 100 AD. So let's have a look at the concept of, could it be that having to think in these new and challenging ways is actually really giving our brains a test and a stretch? Human brains are alive and built to learn and grow. Intelligence comes in many different forms. Exposing our brain to fresh new challenges and responses is what a brain was built for. And actually the concept of neuroplasticity is the fancy term for the brain's ability to reorganize itself in light of the new knowledge that it acquires. So for example, the hippocampus, so the part of the brain that stores spatial knowledge of a black taxi driver after completing the knowledge is 20% heavier than a standard hippocampus of someone who hasn't completed the knowledge. How fascinating is that? So literally the weight of that knowledge can be measured in mass. So people who acquire new languages or pick up learning musical instruments again, find that their parts of the brain will be firing off the potential being dormant. So what this gives us an example of is having to think differently could be really good for our brain later on in life, because we're firing it up and giving it some energy. The next thing to have a bit think about is, well, how though do I ensure that I don't get paralysed by competing choices? So this fits really nicely as an add-on from the OODA loop. And when faced with dilemma, the brain tool cuts through circular thinking. So if there's something that you're umming and ahhing about at the moment, then the brain tool can really help. And the B stands for, what are the benefits of taking this action? What are the risks of taking this action or decision or choice? What are the alternatives to this particular action? So is there something else I could do? What does my gut feel tell me? So the intuition. And if I were to do nothing, what would happen if I took no action? And no decision may be the best decision in that moment. Deciding to not take a decision is a decision. That's not a passive action, that is an active action. So reviewing a decision from tactical to strategic can also check that your logic is going to stand the test of time. I was blown away at a tech conference mid last year by listening to some of the unintended consequences from safer UK roadways. So absolutely, the positive intent has been to reduce the number of fatalities on the UK roads. I think the figure that is talked about quite a bit is 10 people a day at the time were dying on UK roads due to road traffic accidents. So there's been a drive towards making cars and the automotive industry safer and safer. In light of automated driving as well, there's been lots of talk about that making it safer, reducing human error, etc. However, the unintended consequence as time has elapsed is that there is less supply of fresh organs to donate. So the safety benefits at one end has actually had some health impacts the other end. But they couldn't have been predicted at that stage because these things might have taken years, if not decades, to evolve in terms of the implications. So one of the things that might be worth thinking about right now, while there's so much up in the air, is ensuring that our brain views things not only tactically, so what's the best thing to do right now, but also strategically putting the clock forward. How might this decision stand the test of time? And I came up with this idea because I just like to entertain my brain about 4D thinking. And where this came from was listening to some of the technological developments in the world of construction and digging about 4D printing. So 3D printing is where the printer slices out an object as opposed to a 2D bit of paper. 4D is where there's a bit of time code put in, so that object can change over time. So of course, with huge digging projects, that has huge commercial benefits, because if you're able to turn the digging drill whilst underground without having to remove it, then of course that has huge safety and finance benefits. So it's got me thinking about 4D, because of course our bodies are 4D, aren't they? They're changing over time. And the fourth dimension is the time dimension. So I've been finding this useful to stop me in my tracks from making impulsive tactical decisions and just reviewing it from a more strategic perspective. So 1D is the height, 2D is then the width, 3D is then the depth, and 4D is then the space, the time element put in. So this decision that I'm thinking about right now, how does this decision look when viewed straight on? That's your first dimension. Let's add a bit of width. How does this decision look when viewed from an opposite angle? So what would an opponent say about this decision? Let's add in some depth. How about when all the knock-on effects are considered? How does this decision stand? And let's now add some time. How about if I imagined this decision from 3 to 5 years down the line? How do I now view this decision? Does it feel like the best decision? Even if I can't predict the outcome, does it feel like the best decision? And so how do I keep a sensible, logical and rational thought process? Well, remember, the brain is alive and built to learn and grow. So being stretched intellectually is good for us, and intelligence comes in many forms. If faced with a dilemma, the brain tool cuts through circular thinking if you find yourself getting paralysed by indecision, and reviewing a decision from different time frames helps move from tactical to strategic decision making, which can help test your logic. So, final objective, how do I explain and engage people in these decisions? So I've sat there for 20 minutes, earplugs in, bit of silence, doing my OODA, doing my brain, thinking about 4D thinking. We've got a team call coming up in 20 minutes. How am I going to share and articulate all this thinking that I've been doing? So Seneca, 2,000 years ago, say true glory, true respect comes from the heart, not from the lips. We all know that it's the actions that speak louder than words. The challenge we've all got now is we only have words. We only have 2D. We can't catch up with each other informally in the corridors. There are no corridors that we're passing. Any corridors that we create are purposeful, time-built webinars that we put in time in. So how am I going to receive and give respect in that moment on the 10 minutes that I've got in a team call, let's say? How am I going to do that? How am I going to nail it in that moment? So I think one of the first things to just ever think about is the more that we can share our thinking to involve people in the reason for the decision in the first place, there's less likely people are to resist and create some drama because they feel like they've been treated by adults. So if I get onto my team catch-up call and I just blurt out a decision that I've been thinking about for 2 days, but I blurt it out in 2 minutes, then potentially I'm not bringing you with me. So a skill that's really been tested left, right, centre for all of us now is being able to tell the story clearly when all I've got is an empty room and a laptop screen in front of me. So this is something that really stuck with me. Someone had used it on a TED talk that was in the background image, and it really stuck with me. And on the back, it just had an image that very clearly said, easy decision, hard life. And it really stuck with me. So when I am articulating and sharing maybe a decision that I've arrived at, could it be the little bit of backstory helps bring you along with me? So if we're faced with a decision, do we take the easy decision, which potentially could lead to a hard life? It is easier in that moment not to floss my teeth, check my bank account, pick up the phone and give that feedback. But potentially, all that is doing is shoring up and storing up later hardship. If I take the hard decision to floss my teeth, check my bank account and see actually how much is in there, pick up the phone and have that feedback conversation, then I am potentially on the trajectory to leading an easier life, because I've dealt with it. Easy decision, hard life. Hard decision, easy life. The path of least resistance, so the easy decision in that moment, potentially leads to tougher, bigger decisions later down the line. And I hope, like me, this brings a source of comfort and confidence if you're finding yourself surrounded by some, not the most wanted of decisions that you're needing to take, but dealing with the harder stuff while it's smaller potentially leads to easier stuff down the line. And it's always stuck with me there. So being able to clearly articulate to people, if we do take this decision, then these are the benefits. If we don't take this decision, then these are the consequences. Could that be actually a little 2-minute intro before then talking about some of the decision that you might be sharing? The diamond model is a phenomenal way to organise and structure how you communicate your decision. So this tool, I absolutely love it. It's so simple. You begin with a beginning, you have a middle, and you have an end. So it's not an unwieldy or waffling bit of communication. It allows you, particularly online, to be able to nail it in a particular amount of time. So this might help plan, prepare, and present how you pitch a decision, for example. So it's a shape of a diamond, so nice and tight and sharp at the beginning. So you might set the context using the previous stuff I talked about. If we don't take this decision. You might then explain the issue. So you're explaining what the current situation is that requires there to be some thinking and decision making. To then describe your thinking. And what better way to describe your thinking than using the tools that enabled you to have your inward process of thinking as an outward tool to justify your thinking. So OODA, to explain, this is what I observed, this is the orientation and interpretation I put around it, these are decisions that we could have taken, this is the action that I believe is best. Brain, to justify the choice. The reason why I think that action is the best one to take is the benefits, the risks, the alternatives, my intuition, and if we do nothing, suggests that this actually is the best action we can take right now. And 4D, to advise on the future. However, what I have been thinking about is taking this action now potentially has ramifications for our industry, profession, team, family in X amount of months or years' time. How do we feel about that? A summary of the logic, depending on how complicated the process has been, clarifying suggested actions, any questions, etc., and then closing on some kind of point. So the outcome may not be in your control, but the ability to take a good decision with what you have is. Structure is the key to confident communication, especially during uncertainty. No one wants to hear the pilot on a plane saying, "Can anyone fly the plane?" You want to hear that calm, controlled voice saying, "We've got this." Confidence, after all, is just a sense of certainty about what is going to happen next. And that's where I have found over the years, and other people I think as well, that a theory doesn't actually necessarily tell you what to say, but it allows you to be able to be yourself within the platform of knowing. I'm going to explain, demonstrate and suggest a decision, etc. So the final thing to have a think about is, unfortunately, now we know this, you can't not know this. The power of learning is once you've learnt it, your brain can't unlearn it. I mean, it depends on how much wine you drink tonight. But now you know this, you can't not know it. So have a think about what you're going to decide next. Is there some easy decisions that you're kind of erring towards that actually, when you think about it, could lead you to a harder onward life? Are there maybe some hard decisions, the one that it's going to be least easy to take, but actually it's going to lead you towards the more of the stuff that you then want? So how do I explain and engage people in decisions? Share your thinking to involve people in the reason for the need for a decision. That's half the journey. Using a diamond model or something similar to organise and structure how you communicate your decision, rather than blurting it out and assuming that everyone is with you, taking people through the journey that you used inwardly to be able to extrovert that and take people with you. And taking to easing decisions can lead to a harder life. Taking harder decisions leads to an easier life. So what's this got you thinking about in terms of you right now, whether that's domestic, corporate, professional, industry, etc. So we began with Marcus Aurelius, let's end with Marcus Aurelius. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realise this and you will find strength. And this is over 2,000 years old, this bit of wisdom. This period of transformation is testing skills and developing strengths in brand new ways. There was not a training course written last year to predict and tool us up for this right now. However, after confinement, we could emerge better skilled for the future. The obstacle is the way. Dealing with this right now could actually be developing the precise skills we need to be happy, healthy, and be able to sustain ourselves in the decade ahead. And thinking clearly and being decisive are premium skills that are worth practicing no matter what the topic. So whether you're furloughed, whether you are in work, out of work, whether you are homeschooling, whatever your situation, you've got a house that's got too many people in, a house that's got not enough people in, no matter what the topic, the skill of thinking clearly and being decisive is so premium that it is worth some conscious practice. I'm hoping you found some of these topics useful. So here we have Stonehenge, an inspiring piece of the British landscape. Over 5,000 years old. Think of all the changing weather patterns they've seen, the changing fashions, the trends, the ways in which we've worked. They've seen so much change around them, and yet still they are there standing strong. There will be some core values of how we all work now and how we relate with each other will all be eternal. But there also are some aspects that require us to remind ourselves what it means to be human and how can we be foxy, for example, and be flexible and fluid in the way in which we adjust our skills. So how am I going to be confident in my decisions amid these new and evolving pressures? How are we going to remain sensible, logic and rational in our thinking? And how are we going to explain and engage people in our decisions during isolation, which is a brand new decision-making environment for us all. So it's been a pleasure to see you at this lockdown lunch and learn. Next one is going to be on Monday. So it's been wonderful to see you. Keep human, stay foxy, and I'll see you soon.